Imagine standing on a runway where a plane takes off every 45 seconds. Now imagine digging beneath that runway. 6 feet down, you'd hit concrete. 12 feet down, layers of reinforced steel, but keep going. 20 feet, 30 feet, and there, you'd find something nobody talks about. The remains of a village. Homes that sheltered families for generations. A 2,000-year-old Iron Age fort. Streets where children once played. All of it. Erased. Heathrow Airport. 80 million passengers every year. The world's busiest international gateway. But here's what they don't tell you in the departure lounge. This place was taken. Families were forced to leave. An entire village vanished overnight. Their sacrifice built the runway you walk on today. So how did farmland become the world's most famous airport? What happened to the people who lived here? And why did the government need this land so desperately during World War II? Tonight we're going beneath the surface, back to 1929, when this story truly began. But before planes, before terminals, before Heathrow even had a name, there was just land and people who loved it. The land was flat, perfect for growing things. Market gardens stretched toward the horizon. Apple orchards heavy with fruit. Small farms where families had worked the soil for generations. A village sat quietly in the middle of it all. Heath Row. No one famous lived there. No grand estates. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. Then one day, a man arrived, Richard Ferry, an aircraft engineer. He looked at this peaceful farmland and saw something else entirely. A runway. He approached the vicar of Harmondsworth with an unusual proposal. £15,000 for 150 acres of land. The vicar must have wondered. What could anyone possibly want with flat farmland, Ferry told him. He wanted to build a private airfield, to test aircraft, to push the boundaries of flight. The deal was made. By 1930, construction began. One grass runway, a handful of wooden buildings, nothing fancy, nothing permanent. Ferry called it the Great West Aerodrome. Local farmers watched the work with curiosity, some with concern. The sound of engines would soon replace the sound of wind through wheat fields. Test pilots began arriving. Small aircraft touched down on that grass strip. Propellers spun. Engines roared to life. Then silence again. For over a decade, that's all it was. A private testing ground. Pilots came and went. The village carried on. Farmers still tended their crops. Children still played in the lanes. Life continued at the pace it always had. Nobody imagined what was coming. Nobody could have guessed that within 15 years their entire world would be bulldozed into memory. Because in 1939, everything changed. War arrived. The middle of World War II, Britain needed something critical, an airfield for long-range bombers, troop carriers heading to the Far East, something big, something strategic. Military planners spread maps across tables in London. They searched for the perfect location. It had to be flat. It had to be west of the city, away from German bombing routes. It had to have space, lots of it. And then someone pointed to a spot on the map. Heath Row, the small village, Ferry's modest airfield, flat land stretching for miles. Perfect. The government made a decision. They would requisition the land. All of it. In 1944, officials arrived in Heathrow with papers, legal documents, orders that couldn't be refused. Families were given notice. You have to leave. Your homes will be demolished. Your land is needed for the war effort. Imagine that conversation. Imagine opening your door to find government officials standing there, telling you that everything you've ever known is about to disappear. Some families had lived there for generations. Their grandparents were buried in the local churchyard. Their children had been born in these homes. But war doesn't wait for sentiment. The evacuation began. Families packed what they could carry. Furniture, photographs, memories wrapped in newspaper. They left their homes for the last time, not knowing where they'd go. The village of Heath Row was emptied. Then the demolition crews arrived. Homes that had stood for centuries came down in days. Stone walls crumbled, wooden beams splintered. Gardens that had been carefully tended were torn up by bulldozers. The village disappeared. But construction had only just begun. Engineers arrived with ambitious plans. They didn't just want a simple airfield, they wanted something revolutionary. A Star of David pattern of runways. 6 runways, intersecting at different angles. This design would allow aircraft to take off and land regardless of wind direction. The longest runway would stretch 3,000 yards. Nearly 2 miles of concrete, an RAF control tower, F, would rise from the landscape. Command centres, hangars, fuel depots. This wasn't just an expansion of Fairey's little airfield. This was transformation on a massive scale. Construction crews worked through 1944 and into 1945. They poured concrete in seemingly endless quantities. They laid drainage systems to handle the notorious London clay soil. But here's the twist. By the time construction was nearly complete, the war was ending. Japan surrendered in August 1945. The need for a massive RAF base in the Far East evaporated. The government looked at this enormous construction project and asked a question. What do we do with it now? Someone had an idea. London needed a new civil airport. The existing airports at Croydon and Northolt were too small, too outdated for the coming age of commercial aviation. This new airfield west of London, it was perfect. On January 1st, 1946, the airfield was officially handed over to the Air Ministry, not as a military base, as London's new civil airport. They called it London Airport. But there was a problem. The war had just ended. Resources were scarce. Britain was broke, rebuilding from years of conflict. There was no money for fancy terminals, no budget for passenger amenities, so they improvised. The first passenger terminals at London Airport were old military tents. Marquees left over from the war set up along Bath Road. Inside these tents, workers tried to create some comfort. They brought in floral patterned armchairs, small tables with vases of fresh flowers, settees that looked like they belonged in someone's living room, but there was no heating. In winter, passengers froze while waiting for their flights. In summer, the tent walls were rolled up to let in a breeze. To reach the aircraft, passengers walked across wooden duckboards. These boards kept shoes clean from the muddy airfield. It was primitive, uncomfortable, almost comical compared to modern airports, but it worked. On January 1st, 1946, the first commercial flight took off from London Airport. A converted Lancaster bomber called Starlight. Its destination, Buenos Aires. The journey took over 35 hours. Passengers sat in cramped seats where bomb racks had once been. They flew through the night, stopping to refuel in Lisbon and Dakar, watching the world pass beneath them through small windows. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. By the end of 1946, 63,000 passengers had travelled through this muddy, tent-filled airport. 5 years later, in 1951, that number had jumped to 796,000. The tents weren't going to be enough anymore. The British government hired an architect, Frederick Gibbard. His task? Design a proper airport. Gibbard looked at the site and created a vision. A central terminal area, accessed by an underground tunnel running beneath the main runway. A 122-foot control tower as the focal point. A passenger terminal called the Europa Building. An office block called the Queen's Building. In 1955, Queen Elizabeth II arrived to open the new facilities. She stood before the crowd and made a prediction. London Airport will continue to grow in importance as one of the world's centres of air traffic. She had no idea how right she was. The 1950s saw aviation transform. Jet engines replaced propellers. Aircraft grew larger, faster, more capable. By 1961, the old tents were long gone. Airlines operated from the Europa Terminal, soon renamed Terminal 2, or the Oceanic Terminal, which became Terminal 3. These terminals handled a new kind of traveller. The jet age had arrived. Boeing 707s landed at Heathrow, VC-10s, Tridents, aircraft that could carry hundreds of passengers across oceans in hours instead of days. In 1969, Terminal 1 opened. By then, 5 million passengers passed through Heathrow every year. The 1970s brought even bigger changes. In 1970, Pan Am began flying the Boeing 747 from New York to Heathrow, the jumbo jet, an aircraft so large it seemed impossible. 4 engines, 2 decks, capacity for over 400 passengers. Aviation would never be the same. Then in 1976, something even more remarkable took off from Heathrow's runways: Concorde, the supersonic passenger jet, capable of flying faster than the speed of sound, London to New York in 3 hours. 2 Concordes departed simultaneously that day, one from Heathrow, one from Paris, a symbol of British-French cooperation and engineering brilliance. The aircraft was beautiful, elegant, its distinctive drooped nose, its delta wings. But Concorde represented something more. It represented ambition, the belief that humans could push boundaries, could make the impossible routine. By the late 1970s, 27 million passengers were using Heathrow every year. The airport kept expanding. Terminal 4 opened in 1986. More gates, more capacity, more destinations. But beneath all this growth, something else was happening, something most passengers would never see. Walk through Terminal 5 today. Bright, modern, filled with shops and restaurants. But go down, keep going down. 3 floors below the departure gates, there's a space that doesn't belong. A ghost train station. Platforms built in 2008. Staircases that descend from the ceiling but stop short of the ground. Dim lighting, eerie silence. No trains have ever stopped here. No passengers have ever waited on these platforms. It was built with foresight, a space reserved for future rail connections. Southern Rail to Waterloo, Western links to Reading, connections that may come in 2030, or later, or never. For now, it sits empty, waiting. But Terminal 5's ghost station isn't alone. Beneath Terminal 2 there's another abandoned space. Vast, cavernous. A basement the size of a football field where no one ever passes. Metal staircases hang from the ceiling leading nowhere. The air is damp, cold. This space too was built for the future. For an interterminal train system that doesn't exist yet. For a third runway that's been debated for decades. The architects called it planning ahead, building infrastructure before you need it. But walking through these spaces feels different, like walking through a tomb for dreams not yet realised. And these ghost stations are just the beginning. Beneath Heathrow's terminals, beneath the runways and taxiways, there's an entire world most passengers never imagine. A network of tunnels. The Art Tunnel, Airside Road Tunnel, runs for 0.88 miles beneath the airport. Twin-board passages wide enough for trucks and emergency vehicles. It connects Terminals 1, 2 and 3 to Terminal 5, winding left and right, up and down. The tunnel had to avoid the Heathrow Express Railway, the Piccadilly line. At one point it passes just 3 metres from the Express Tunnel. 3 metres, less than 10 feet, between vehicles speeding through darkness and trains carrying passengers to central London. The speed limit in the tunnel is 30 mph, but if a vehicle stops for too long, alarms sound. The tunnel must keep flowing, always moving. There are other tunnels too, baggage tunnels, service tunnels, emergency access routes. A 0.75-mile tunnel connects Terminal 5 to the other terminals. Bags move through it on automated systems. Millions of pieces of luggage, travelling through darkness sorted by computers and cameras. Workers navigate this underground world daily. Maintenance crews, security teams, engineers who keep the invisible infrastructure running. Most passengers never think about it. They walk through bright terminals, past shops and cafes, boarding planes to distant destinations. They don't realise they're walking above a labyrinth. Remember the families who were forced to leave in 1944? Their story didn't end when they packed their belongings and walked away. Heathrow Village was gone. But the land remembered. When construction began for Terminal 5 in the early 2000s, archaeologists arrived first. They knew this land had history. They just didn't know how much. The archaeological dig became one of the largest in UK history. Teams worked for months, carefully excavating before construction could begin. What they found was extraordinary. Remains of an Iron Age fort, dating back over 2,000 years. The site was named Caesar's Camp, though no one knows if Julius Caesar ever actually stood there. Pottery fragments, tools, weapons, evidence of people who had lived on this land millennia before Heathrow village ever existed. Neolithic artifacts, medieval remains, layer upon layer of human history, all buried beneath what would become airport terminals. Over 80,000 artifacts were recovered, 9,000 years of human presence compressed into the soil. The archaeologists documented everything, photographed, catalogued, preserved what they could. Then the construction crews moved in. Concrete was poured, steel was erected, Terminal 5 rose from the ground where ancient peoples had once built their fort. The largest freestanding building in the UK, glass and steel and modern engineering, built on layers of forgotten history, Terminal 5 opened in March 2008. It cost $4.3 billion to construct. It can handle 30 million passengers a year. The opening day was chaos. Baggage systems failed. Flights were cancelled. It was a PR disaster. But they fixed the problems, the system stabilised, and Terminal 5 became what it was meant to be, a showcase of modern aviation infrastructure. In 2014, Terminal 2 was completely rebuilt. They called it the Queen's Terminal, a nod to the Queen's building that once stood on the same site. It cost $2.5 billion, designed by Spanish architect Luis Vidal. Light-filled, efficient, beautiful. United Airlines was the first to move in. Today, Heathrow operates with 4 active terminals. Terminal 1 closed in 2015, demolished to make room for Terminal 2's expansion. Another piece of history, erased for progress. The abandoned Terminal 1 building still stands. You can see it as you drive toward Terminals 2 and 3. Empty, silent, a ghost of the jet age. Building an airport on London clay is not easy. Clay soil is unstable. It swells when wet. It shrinks when dry. It shifts and settles unpredictably. Engineers had to solve this problem before they could build anything. The solution? Innovation. They created elaborate drainage systems, networks of gravel-filled trenches in herringbone patterns. Water would percolate through layers of stone, preventing the clay from becoming waterlogged. For the runways, they developed new concrete techniques, air entraining agents that improved freeze-thaw resistance, expansion joints every 20 metres to handle thermal movement. The runways at Heath Row can handle the largest aircraft in the world, the Airbus A380, the Boeing 747-8, planes weighing over 500 tonnes at takeoff. That requires incredibly strong pavement, compressive strength of 4,000 pounds per square inch, multiple layers of reinforced concrete and asphalt. Each runway is 50 metres wide. That's the length of an Olympic swimming pool. The northern runway stretches 3,902 metres, nearly 2.5 miles. The southern runway is 3,758 metres. Every 10 years they resurface a runway. It takes 6 months. Cost $20 million, the surface must be ready for aircraft to land on it just 1 hour after being laid. And beneath all of this, hidden from view, the infrastructure continues. Fuel pipelines, double-walled pipes with leak detection systems, millions of gallons of jet fuel stored and distributed beneath passengers' feet, electrical systems, water supplies, data networks. The baggage handling system alone stretches for miles, conveyor belts, scanners, computer systems that read tags and route bags automatically. Over 300 flights pass through Heathrow every day, a plane every 45 seconds during peak hours. The coordination required is staggering. Over 80 million passengers pass through Heathrow every year. 90 airlines operate here. Flights to over 180 destinations in more than 90 countries. Heathrow is the busiest international airport in the world. Not the biggest, that's Atlanta. Not the most flights, that's Chicago. But for international passenger traffic, Heathrow is number 1. It's also one of the UK's largest employers. Over 76,000 people work at Heathrow. Pilots, flight attendants, baggage handlers, security staff, retail workers, engineers, cleaners. The airport operates like a small city. It has its own police force, fire department, medical facilities, places of worship for multiple religions. There are over 70 shops, 40 places to eat, lounges, hotels, even an art gallery. In 2022, Heathrow handled 1.4 million tons of cargo, everything from fresh flowers to luxury cars to life-saving medicines. The economic impact is enormous. Heathrow contributes billions to the UK economy. It's a critical hub for business travel, tourism and international trade. But Heathrow also represents something more: connection. Every day, people arrive at Heathrow from every corner of the planet. Different languages, different cultures, different stories. Some are travelling for business, some for pleasure, some are going home, some are leaving home. Families reunite in the arrivals hall. Travellers say goodbye at security. Love stories begin, love stories end. Heathrow is where the world meets, and beneath it all, beneath the rushing crowds and roaring engines, beneath the concrete and steel, the ghosts remain. There's a debate happening right now about Heathrow's future. The airport wants to build a third runway, expand capacity, to handle even more passengers. Environmental groups oppose it, local residents oppose it. The carbon emissions, the noise, the disruption. The debate has raged for years. Governments have approved the expansion, then cancelled it, approved it again, delayed it. It's complicated, because Heathrow represents a fundamental tension in modern life. We want to travel, we want connection, we want the economic benefits of global aviation, but we also want clean air, quiet neighbourhoods, a stable climate. Can both exist? That's the question Heathrow forces us to ask. Meanwhile, the airport continues to evolve. New technology is being tested: electric ground vehicles, sustainable aviation fuel, more efficient air traffic management. Plans exist for better public transport connections, improved terminals, enhanced passenger experience. Heathrow isn't finished changing, but as it grows, as it modernises, as it pushes toward an uncertain future, the past remains beneath. The iron, age-fought, the medieval artefacts, the foundations of Heathrow Village, the families who were displaced, the homes that were demolished, the sacrifices that were made, they're still there, buried, forgotten by most, but not by history. Every time a plane takes off from Heathrow, it rises on the foundation of what came before. The farmers who worked this land, the families who loved it, the engineers who transformed it. All of them are part of Heathrow's story, and maybe that's the real lesson here. Progress requires sacrifice. Growth requires change. The future is built on the past. We can honour that past, remember it, learn from it, but we can't bring it back. Heathrow Village is gone. The apple orchards are gone. The quiet farmland is gone. In their place stands one of the most remarkable achievements of modern engineering. An airport that connects our world. A place where dreams take flight. Built on ground where other dreams once grew, and beneath it all in the darkness where passengers never walk. Ghost stations wait for trains that may never come. Tunnels carry vehicles through underground mazes. Ancient artifacts rest in museum archives. And somewhere, in the silence between departures, you can almost hear it. The echo of a village that disappeared. The whisper of families who left everything behind. The quiet reminder that beneath every runway, beneath every terminal, beneath every dream of flight, there are layers we never see, stories we never hear, sacrifices we never acknowledge, until now. As you drift off tonight, think about that. Think about the layers beneath us, the history we walk on without knowing. Think about the people whose sacrifices made our modern world possible. And maybe, the next time you board a plane at Heathrow, take a moment. Look down at the runway beneath your feet. Listen for the silence between engines, and remember, there's always more to the story than what we see on the surface, sweet dreams.